right, so if your table happens to be cutting out in what can only be described as a wonky way, there's a couple of factors that can come into play. Let's talk about those. One, with the control box on, the system shouldn't move. So you should be able to grab it, and there is no give, no flexibility, no nothing. If there's any flexibility, if there is any sound or a chunk or even a slight bit of movement, that will cause, especially circles in particular, to go off course. So just double check that. I know it's something that you would typically catch when you're making it, but it's always good to double check that because we are starting from the basics to make sure that you are in fact cutting properly. Now when it comes to the actual control system, and let's say you do have issues with it being, as I said before, wonky, one of the primary things is that the control box not necessarily is away from the hypertherm, as the hypertherm itself isn't a high voltage machine. The high voltage plasma cutters, or I guess high frequency plasma cutters, don't look like this. Instead, what we're more concerned about is where this power supply is coming from. So we actually have all of our control components wired separate, and we keep all of our strips, all of our wiring away from any of the high voltage power. Now in this case, because it's just the 220 coming off of the top here, and we just have these two 110 volt plugs as well, it's not as much of an issue. But if you are in the vicinity of a junction box and you have everything wired directly to that junction box location, you might be in the neighborhood of actually potentially causing frequency inconsistencies with the computer and control box setup, as they can be sensitive to high frequency and changes in electricity. It's probably the biggest cause of wonkiness in a table. So one of the first things I would do is make sure that I do have the power moved away from a junction box. Whether how you would manage to do that, move it to a different outlet, test your system by connecting it to another part. I was testing this table at one point, and I have a junction box, a little box sitting over there, all the way across the shop, just to make sure that I wasn't getting interference off of this, and just to be sure that any issues that I could or would have with this table would not be encountered in the same way either way. And in this case, it checked out. In another case with a customer where their junction box was right here and their control box was less than 5 feet away from the junction box, it caused a couple of issues with their table, causing incomplete circles, or circles that were kiltered and leaning in a funky direction. Just something to watch out for. Please make sure that the power and the power supply for all of the control components are in fact moved away from high frequency or high energy junction boxes. Just a concern, give that a shot. If you're experiencing the wonkiness, do that initially, just to make sure that you're not experiencing issues outside of the machine. There are a couple of other factors that really come into play when you're trying to see a box that moves in such a sporadic manner. There's very few consistent factors within a control box that can cause that particular shape. That being said, check those out, run those tests, let me know, and we'll get you all fixed up.